Hey there, folks. This is Jacob Sipkin, and this is a TZ Strength Joint. We're going to be talking today about programming. Specifically, we're going to look at one way that I structure our program week to week that I refer to as the high power, low power template. This is the template that's going to be in use for TZ Strength programming this year, beginning with the 2018 preseason that starts Monday, September 11th of 2017, and it's going to serve as our basic framework, the structure of the program up until the 2018 Open begins. If you want to learn more about our programs, both for competitors and affiliates, you can check out tzstrength.com. So what is this high power, low power template? Functionally, it's a way to consolidate stressors throughout the week by estimating the relative intensity, speed, power, volume of the things we're doing, especially intensity, speed, and power. So the first thing we want to understand is the concept of consolidation of stressors, which is really a pretty straightforward concept. It essentially means training like elements with other like elements so that each training day elicits a particular type of adaptation, right? You induce a stress that is similar across the board. The adaptations are similar. You have time to recover between that type of stress or from that type of stress between training days. If you want to learn more about that concept, Chad Wesley Smith of Juggernaut Training Systems has a few great articles about it. I will put those in the description. Chad's stuff is great. I think he was the first person to introduce me to the concept of consolidation of stressors probably about 5 years ago. Often what we see in strength training for consolidation of stressors is a body part split, right? So if you have a leg day, a push day, and a pull day, just for example, what you're doing is you're consolidating the stress of those muscle groups into particular training days so that you have time to recover from that stress before the next time you train that muscle group or movement pattern. But you can also consolidate stressors in other ways, and primarily what we're going to be looking at here is consolidating by relative power and speed of the things we're doing. One of the best resources you can go to if you want to learn more about this sort of type of consolidation of stressors that we're doing, which specifically is going to be trying to consolidate very dissimilar things like strength and power training and endurance training, is Complete Human Performance. Alex Viada, they have some great resources. They are fantastic at creating programs which consolidate stress in this manner, and a lot of what I do is built on their models, so definitely be sure to check out Complete Human Performance. I'll also link them in the description. The most challenging thing in consolidating stressors for a sport like CrossFit is that so much of what we do is so very, very dissimilar and sometimes hard to quantify. But what we're trying to do is design a schedule that does as good a job as we can of taking these dissimilar things, figuring out which ones are the least dissimilar, and categorizing them into training days by that metric. So what we've got here is a basic 7-day template. You've got 5 weeks of training in front of you. Obviously, we're not talking about the specifics. We're not talking about exercise selection today. We're just talking about the types of training we're going to be doing. And we have 2 types a day, high power and low power. So we've got the green days, days 1, 3, 5, which are probably going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday for most people. Those are our high power days, and they consist of things like Olympic lifts, sprinting, plyometrics, sometimes sled work. It's also going to include our relatively shorter Metcons, WODs, and our anaerobic endurance training. Days 2, 4, and 6 are our lower power days, and here we're going to see slower and heavier lifts, squat, press, deadlift variations. We're going to see longer Metcons. We're going to see aerobic endurance training. Gymnastics work I can pretty much put anywhere. I tend to select the placement more based on where it seems to fit best with regards to things like estimated local fatigue of the shoulders and stuff like that. Relative to stuff like Metcons and hard sprints and heavy lifting, it's not super stressful. It's also really important to keep in mind that this is just a framework. I'll often write a week of training out according to the structure that I have written out, and I'll kind of move some stuff around because for whatever reason I'll decide that there's a better way to structure that particular week. So what you see here is a basic structure. There's nothing sacred about it. You just have to have it in place, and then you can adjust day by day and week by week. So we're going to do a quick breakdown of the way each training day looks, but I want to go over one thing first. There's something we have here called gears. So you can see on sport workouts, they have a rating, gear 2.5 to 3, or gear 2 to 2.5, etc., etc. All that is the way that I gauge the intensity of the workout, so that I know that I'm doing a good job of making sure we have varied intensity, and so that if I provide that gear to the athlete, they know what it is and they know if they should change something in the workout to meet that demand. So the gear system is a ranking from 1 to 3. And this is kind of how it works. Imagine the gears in a car. If you are driving in first gear, you're probably towing something heavy. You're moving slow, and you're working against a high resistance. On the other hand, if you're in high gear, you're in fifth gear, you're probably on the freeway going 75, 80 miles an hour. There's very low resistance. You're moving quickly. Low gear workouts are workouts that tend to be limited by the difficulty of the movements inherent to them. So for example, a workout with strict muscle-ups, strict handstand push-ups, and heavy kettlebell snatches, as we saw in Regionals NATE in 2016, that would be a Gear 1 or 1.5 workout. You're not really limited by your capacity, your endurance, or your stamina. You're limited by how challenging the movements themselves are. On the other end of the spectrum are workouts that are Gear 3, and those are going to be workouts that are more or less entirely about your engine. So a great example would be something like 50-calorie assault bike followed by 100 double unders. Assuming that you have the basic skill of the double under down, that workout's pretty much going to be limited by how hard you can work for that duration. Gears don't dictate duration, right? You can have a Gear 1 workout that's 5 minutes. You could have a Gear 3 workout that's 30 minutes. But often it is beneficial to have higher gear workouts be shorter. They could be in intervals to accumulate volume, but working for a shorter time, have lower gear workouts be longer, just to sustain the intent of the workout. It's really easy if you have a 30-minute workout to take a workout that's designed to be Gear 3, super high intensity, and pace yourself a little bit too much, just as an example. But at least in theory, regardless of duration, a workout can be Gear 1, 2, or 3. We're mostly going to be doing workouts between Gears 2 and 3 because we do a ton of Gear 1 work whenever we lift weights, whenever we work on our gymnastics strength and skill, whenever we do top speed work. So most of our Metcons are going to be between Gears 2 and 3. So let's take a look at this, this daily structure. So day 1, as you can see, it's in green, and that means that it's a high power day. So what have we got? We've got snatches, we've got jerks, we've got sprint work, we've got anaerobic monostructural work. You see there in the first week it says TT, that's time trial. In the second week it says intervals, there's a little cut off there, but that's what it says. And then we have sport intervals at Gear 2.5 to 3, or a sport sprint. So all of these are pretty high output and pretty low volume, right? So even if I do a relatively high volume snatch workout, let's say I snatch 10 sets of 2, the total volume as measured by tonnage, so that is, let's say I'm doing snatches with 250 pounds, each set is 500 pounds, I do 10 sets, that's 5,000 pounds of volume. Compare that to, let's say, doing 6 sets of 5 in the squat with 350, which is going to be something like 10,000 pounds of volume. Obviously, the volume as calculated by tonnage is much, much higher with the heavier, slower lifts. So snatches and jerks are pretty low volume, but very high power. They're fast, explosive movements. So we follow that up with some sprint work. Typically, we're going to do sprints between 50 and 200 meters. It could also include things like hill sprints if they're available to the athlete. I love hill sprints. It's not going to be stuff like 400s and 800s for the sprint work. But then we have our anaerobic monostructural. That's either a time trial or a sprint. And that's going to be something like maybe building up to a max effort 400 or 800 meter run, or 500 or 1K row, or 50 calories on the assault bike. That's the time trial. Anaerobic monostructural intervals might be something like doing a 30-second sprint on the assault bike every 3 minutes for 8 sets. So working really, really hard for a pretty short period of time, getting some good recovery, and repeating that. You'll see that the days that we have an anaerobic monostructural time trial, we have intervals in the sport, and vice versa. If we have a sports sprint, a single workout, so an example of a sports sprint workout might be something like event 6 from this year, 2017 regionals, where it was 30 calories on the assault bike, 20 burpee box jump overs, and then 10 D-ball over shoulder, sandbag over shoulder. Short workout, really, really hard, probably going to be between 3 and 6 minutes. So we alternate one of the two, the monostructural or the sport is an all-out single sprint, the other is going to be an interval. What we see in common is that all of this is high intensity, high power, not a ton of volume, relatively speaking. Still going to be a very hard training day, but it's not like we're going to be doing, 8 sets of squats, 8 sets of presses, etc., which we might do on the following day. Now, I mentioned earlier that in a sport like CrossFit, it's very hard to consolidate stressors because things are so different. But you can see we're doing our best to kind of match like with like. We have high intensity, relatively low volume lifting. We have high intensity, relatively low volume monostructural work, and high intensity, relatively low volume sport-specific endurance work. So moving on to day 2, this is now our first low power, relatively low power day of the week. You can see we have a squat variant, a press variant, gymnastics pressing work. We have a workout that's going to be gear 2 to 2.5, so a little lower intensity than yesterday. And we have strength accessory circuit. So squats there, you can see the progression goes from at 8 down through at 9 and then to a max effort. That's kind of unimportant for now. You can structure that however you want. The important thing is to understand that we're training relatively low power, high volume, and high force movements, right? You have a lot of force production in a squat. You don't have as much power as you do in a snatch or a clean and jerk. Same goes for pressing. We have the gymnastics pressing there again, not necessarily because it fits within the low power, high power paradigm, rather just because I fit the gymnastics in where it's best. You can see I've got pressing there on day 2 and pulling on day 3. I might change that week to week, but generally speaking, that's a pretty good way to go about it. I've got a heavy pressing movement. That's probably a good day to work on some gymnastics pressing. Think of it like if you had an upper body day after your main lift, you might do an accessory exercise. The sport on that day, that's probably going to be our longest workout of the week. It's going to be between 15 and 30 minutes. We could also do that range on Saturday, day 6. I have that slated here to be more like 12 to 18 minutes, but they could switch. No real problem either way there. Going to be slightly lower intensity, gear 2 to 2.5. So that's still a high-intensity workout, still very challenging. And an example of a workout there might be something like a Cindy, where the movements are challenging enough that they might stop you on their own. So, for example, doing a lot of push-ups. If you're Chris Spieler, maybe not. But for most of us, even the relatively fit, the push-ups are going to slow down a bit. So that's probably a gear 2.5 workout. A gear 2 workout might go a little lower if you had, say, Cindy, but you added in a heavy power clean each round. So let's say 3 power cleans at 225 for men, followed by a round of Cindy. We would probably lower the intensity a bit. And then we have a strength accessory circuit. Again, the content doesn't matter too much. I tend to get a good amount of unilateral movements in there. I like to get some rows in there, unilateral squatting and pressing. You could do carries, however you want to do it. But the point is that's the day where we're going to address some strength training of the type that we don't get with our big heavy lifts. Day 3, we're back to high power. We have the clean we're training there. We're going to do some gymnastics pulling. Sled work, you can see the sled work alternates week to week. Week 1 is heavy, so that might be, let's see how heavy you can push a sled for 50 feet. Week 2 is speed and power, so maybe we say, hey, last week we did a really heavy sled push for 50 feet. This week we're going to take it down to about 70% of that, and we're going to do 75-foot sets with plenty of rest, just trying to be as fast as we can. Week 3 is conditioning, so that's going to be pretty light, and it's probably going to be something like push the sled as far as you can for 30 seconds, rest 60 seconds, repeat for 6 to 10 sets. Sport, we have 2 workouts in this day. They're probably going to be one's going to be between 6 and 9 minutes. One's going to be between 9 and 12 minutes. Again, that can change around. That's just the structure. The only difference there is that in week 3, we have a gear 1 to 1.5 workout. So that's only 1 in the entire 5 weeks. That may change as I modify things, as I actually program, but that's how frequently I have it programmed in. And the reason that we put it in week 3 is that that's the week that the sled has conditioning work. So that's going to be some gear 3 work there. So instead of having a gear 2 to 2.5 and a gear 2.5 to 3 workout, we let the sled be the gear 3 work. We maintain the gear 2 to 2.5 sport workout. We also add a 1 to 1.5 sport workout. Day 4, low intensity, steady state cardio. Obviously, that's a low power day. Really, really important. Don't skip this type of training, guys. It's crucial. And it's not active recovery. It's not sitting on the bike for 30 minutes, barely pedaling. It needs to be done with purpose and intent. Don't skip that stuff. That's obviously going to be our lowest power day of the week by a large margin. Day 5, we're back to high power. We start off the day with some plyometrics, so we might be doing depth jumps or bounding. We do snatches, clean and jerks. We do some barbell cycling for conditioning. I tend to move between snatches, clean and jerks, and thrusters week to week. Doesn't matter too much how you go about doing that. Pretty high intensity conditioning there, and then we're going to finish off again with either a sport sprint, 3 to 6 minutes, or high intensity sport intervals. That's going to alternate with day 1. So if on day 1 we did intervals, day 2 we're going to do a sprint workout. Oh, excuse me, day 5, the second short sport workout of the week. If on day 1 we did a sprint, then on day 5 we're going to do intervals. Finally, we move to day 6. That's going to be our deadlift day. I structure the deadlift a little bit differently than I train squatting and pressing, but relatively unimportant there. The point is we have heavy lifting, we have the deadlifts, we have our second squat day. I will make a note here. I think it's important that that second squat day feel pretty psychologically easy for the athlete. It can still be a good hard workout, but there are a lot of ways to make it feel easier mentally. So for example, if on day 2, when you squatted, you built up to a heavy set of 10. What I used to do was say, well, on day 6, on the second squat day, we're going to take 5 sets of 10 with 90% of that. It's really mentally hard, feels like a grind, slows the athlete down. I found that it was instead more valuable to do timed sets for shorter, smaller reps. So maybe we do 10 sets of 5 on 2 minutes, kind of takes the athlete's head out of the game, and each set feels pretty easy because you're doing 5 sets of 5 with a weight that you did for 10. This is also a great opportunity to work in other stuff, kind of fill in gaps throughout the week. So for example, let's say I've already had handstand push-ups in a workout, I've had rope climbs and pull-ups, but I haven't done any muscle-ups. Maybe I'll do an alternating EMOM of squats and muscle-ups. So it's a great opportunity to kind of fill in those gaps. You can also do it with accessory strength lifts. Maybe I want to do squats and dumbbell rows or whatever. We have a heavy carry. Heavy carries are a fantastic training tool. I'm going to be alternating mostly between heavy overhead carries, D-ball or sandbag carries, double kettlebell front rack carries, stuff like that, and heavy farmers. If you have a yoke, that's an awesome tool. Absolutely use it. We're going to have a sport workout, which is going to be gear 2 to 2.5, probably going to be a shorter one, and the main reason that I went for this to be shorter, not short like 5 minutes, just shorter than day 2's workout, we're probably going to be between 12 and 18 here, is because we're also going to have aerobic intervals here. So that might be something like running 800s at a hard but sustainable pace with a 1-minute rest. So substantially, the work-rest ratio is reversed from day 1. We're going to be working substantially longer than we're resting, and we're going to be working on a consistent, steady pace that's pretty submaximal. The following week, on day 6, you can see those two things are flipped. We have an aerobic time trial. We still have sport workout, but we're going to do the time trial first. So an aerobic time trial is going to be something, for example, like a 5K run or row. Might even go as long as a 10K run or row. Could be 10,000 meters on the bike, etc. So guys, that's about it. That's the basic high power, low power template. I'm a big fan of this. It's been a great way that I've used for a couple of years now to structure training. I find more ways to add nuance to it each year, and I'm really looking forward to implementing it in the 2018 season. Again, our preseason begins Monday, September 11th. If you want to find out more about TZ strength programming and how you can get involved, be sure to check out www.tzstrength.com. Thank you so much for watching.